Hey, this is Zach Lug the Great. I recently recorded a video offering advice to young women regarding their youth and the value thereof. Some people have voiced objections to this that I thought worth addressing. The primary objection is that this was devaluing or insulting to older women. This was certainly not intended, but explaining what I meant and what I did not mean is going to take some time, so here goes. In every realm where there are choices available, and these choices have a certain cost, you could say there is a market. Time and intellectual energy spent creating a computer program is traded for money. Money is traded for a basket full of groceries which will eventually become spaghetti supper. In other kinds of economies, a basket full of wheat might be traded directly for jugs of wine. What all of these have in common is that people make choices based upon what they value. Although it may seem cold-hearted, we can look at romantic and sexual relationships the same way, and considered from this perspective, there are traits which are commonly more or less valued by people seeking partners. One term for this is sexual market value. Now, there are all kinds of preferences in this area, just as, for instance, people have varying preferences when looking for a house. At the same time, there is sufficient agreement on what people want in a house that we have a functional housing market. And here is a very important idea. Whatever their preferences in a house, someone who has a budget of $1 million will have more and better options than someone who has a budget of $100,000. Sexual and romantic selection is obviously not exactly the same. But there are important parallels. There is a set of traits that attract men to a woman, and there's a different set of traits that attract women to a man. And a man who has a lot of these traits is going to have more options in terms of romantic partners than a man who has few of them. The same goes for women. Before I go much further, I regret that I will have to take some time to explain things which ought to be obvious, but these days many people have managed to deliberately forget. As George Orwell said, we have now sunk to a depth at which the restatement of the obvious is the first duty of intelligent men. You see, the entire point of all of this, the end purpose, is having and raising children. The biological purpose of sexual intercourse is reproduction. And if we try to pretend otherwise or try to ignore this, we very quickly end up in absurdities. So, since the purpose of romance in sex is producing the next generation, what does this say about what each of the sexes desires from a partner? Women want a man who will be able to protect and provide for her and her children. Yes, provide. Up until yesterday, biologically speaking, having and raising children has functionally incapacitated women for years at a time. If she could attract one, finding a mate who could provide for her during this time would be an enormous advantage. These conditions do not apply today to the same degree, but these are still the conditions we are adapted to and the forces driving our biology. So, based on the conditions of our history, our biology would drive women to seek as mates wealthy, powerful, high-status men. Men do not have quite the same incentives, however. A primary factor men must consider in a mate is fertility. Women don't have this concern because a man's fertility is relatively stable. A woman's, though, declines after adolescence and eventually simply ends. Therefore, a man looking for a mate will look for signs of fertility, and the most easily recognizable sign is youth. Of course, there are other signs, and these are generally considered sexually attractive features in a woman. If you really doubt any of this, just look at the purest expressions of sexual fantasies for each of the sexes. For women, this would be cheap romance novels. And what kind of men consistently show up in cheap romance novels? Wealthy, powerful, dangerous men. And for men, this would be visual pornography. What kind of women dominate visual pornography for men? Young women, or women desperately trying to look as young as they can. Now, none of this is to say that either men or women who do not have these characteristics are less worthwhile. For heaven's sake, I'm hardly wealthy, powerful, or influential, and it seems likely I never will be. Let me give an example. If you intend to build a house, you want to hire men with certain characteristics. In this case, these characteristics are a particular set of acquired skills: carpentry, masonry, plumbing, electrical work, and so on. Does this mean you devalue men who do not have these skills? No. It's just not who you need for this particular task. In the same way, if you're intending to create and raise offspring, which is what romance and sex are about, you'll be looking for particular characteristics, distinct sets for men and women. Does this devalue others? No, but it's not who you want for that job. Whether we like it or not, sexual market value is a basic reality of human nature. And trying to reshape human nature because you think it should be otherwise, well, history has not shown this to be a wise idea. God be with you.